here's a few words from our sponsors.
This is where you start making money. So listen up.
There's no blind guessing with MMPs.
Was the money a user generated inside your app more than the amount of money you paid to acquire them? We're going to go step by step through each part of the user acquisition journey.
APIs,
Post-install events,
ARPU, UR, and ER. There is potential for your monetization strategy to do even better.
Let's dive in.
Hey game developer, are you looking for great new authentic video creatives? Try something totally new with influencer generated content IGC by Opera Event. Influencers and actors will make specific creative content for your games, and Opera Event will deliver you high quality video ads that highlight the best parts of your game. Go to getigc.com to see some examples and get more information. That's getigc.com. All the developers out there that are looking for an easy game server auto-scaling solution should definitely check out GameEye. Choosing GameEye means choosing your players, as GameEye is a platform-independent solution. Game sessions are spread out over multiple providers to ensure redundancy and to achieve the best possible coverage in every region of the world. GameEye is your one-stop shop for all your server orchestration needs. They have many integrations already in place, ready to go. You also can connect to your favorite matchmaker, anti-cheat solution, or network optimization tool to their orchestrator and start running game sessions. They provide the APIs for this. Take advantage of automated capacity management and always have resources to run game sessions. Scale when you need it in locations close to your players. Check out GameEye.com, that's GameYE.com, to see what they're up to and to connect with them. So to the audience here, like, we've been doing this a few times already, and the whole idea has always been to sort of go through the material. I'm going to ask a few questions, and then we're going to let the audience ask a question or few as well. And what I would actually advise people who are now joining, that you can already start populating the Q&A section here in Zoom with questions, and we're going to take those at the end. So yeah, just go ahead and start writing stuff down. And it's great to see already a lot of people have come online. So yeah, Colin, please introduce yourself and the topic that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much, Joachim, for having me. And thanks for everybody for joining. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we launched Merge Friends and how we built the game from scratch within 8 weeks. I can actually just jump right in to the slides, and I'll give you a bit of a introduction of what we're going to talk about today. So yeah, I'll go through the background a little bit about myself, and then we'll go into kind of how we're doing game development at Skunkworks. And then I'll talk about the merge genre and this new subcategory called casual merge. And then merge friends journey. So this is basically how we came about, how we came up with the idea and the speed at which we were able to deliver the game. And then the future, looking into the future of this casual merge, this genre. So yeah, my name is Colin Foss, and I've been working in the gaming industry for over 10 years. I've started actually working at Digital Chocolate. It was almost like a school ground for game developers. A lot of really a learning experience for a lot of really successful game developers, and it was really great for me as well. and yeah, I did a large variety of roles throughout working at Digital Chocolate. Was mainly a product manager, but then I worked as a team lead at Rovio, and I was a designer. I was also a design manager. So I've seen a lot of different perspectives, but I found that I really at some point wanted to figure out what it would be like to, start a company and join something at the very beginning. And so that's where I kind of came into discussions with James. I worked with him at Grand Cru together, and we were talking about, how do we build games, and how can we make a company around that? And I joined Skunkworks, and one of the big things for me, at least, was this idea that the company has, that we have around, finding these underserved audiences. And our goal is really to reach and understand those audiences as best we can, and the best in the industry, and create those games that they really want. And yeah, I would encourage you, this is a plug for James, James's podcast as well, or the webinar. So that's in the link in the slide. So feel free to learn more about the early stages of the company. So I'll be focusing more on Merge Friends and less maybe on the specifics of the company. But if you want to learn more, you can go there. But yeah, so here's the overall timeline. So just keeping with the idea of the underserved audiences, what we tried with Emma's Kitchen was to look at the time management. There was, after some research that we did, there's a lot of stuff that I could go into about the analysis that we did with Emma's Kitchen. We found that the time management genre was actually quite stagnant, and the mechanics there were basically, there was not much innovation or any action going on in that. So one of the we came up with James came up with a concept, and we put together a game quite quickly there. But we found that maybe there were some issues with the game that we needed to figure out, and it would have taken a lot longer. But then we decided that, hey, let's pivot, let's kill the game, and then let's look for a new concept. And that's where Merge Friends came about. This was at the same time when we were kind of thinking about obviously the future of the company, and maybe the door of the company was not closing, but it was getting quite tight. So we needed to deliver a game as fast as possible. And so we came up with Merge Friends, the concept, and after only 8 weeks, we were able to put it into the UK Google Play stores and see already really great early retention metrics. So here's the overall concept of the game. So this is essentially we're taking the casual merge core, and I'll talk about what the casual merge actually means. And then this, I guess it's the player fantasy. There's a lot of elements that we're taking from the city builder genre. But the overall goal, the overall vision of the game, the goal, what we want to have here is that it's a merge. Basically, you're merging and deliver goods to help others and grow your town. That's kind of the almost the vision of the game. And yeah. So why did we go after Merge Friends? I think this is probably something that a lot of developers are really looking at right now. But for us, when we looked at it, I think it was clear that there was a new subgenre that was coming up. And I'll go into first, before I do that, I want to just highlight the kind of history of merge genre, because I think there's a lot of backstory and a lot of things that can fill in a bit from a design and product perspective. So I don't know if anybody knows this game. This is Alchemy. There's also another game called Doodle God. And actually, if you read some articles from Spry Fox, the developer of Tripletown, he mentioned this game as the source of that kind of the inspiration for that game. So essentially in this game, you're merging items together to create new stuff. And there's a lot of discovery And this kind of core element of discovering new items is really what's kind of spans across all of these games that I'm going to talk about. So you have Puzzle Merge. I put this as a kind of early category. This was in 2012 when these games kind of came out. This was like Facebook, same time period when Facebook gaming was actually a thing. And then it took actually quite a long time, but there's this now new genre, which is the Merge 3, which Merge Dragons obviously the biggest player in here. Merge Magic, which is a follow-up, and then you have a whole slew of other games there as well. And this is the one. I mean, when you think of Merge games, this is the game that you kind of think about. There's a lot of I would say there's a lot of it's been pretty stagnant, and I'll go into that now basically. But now you see there's a new genre here, the casual merge that's emerged. And yeah, so if you look just at the overall downloads, this is revenue. I won't put the actual numbers in here. You can see Merge Dragons came out in 2017, and then it actually took quite a long time because if you know anything about Merge Dragons, is actually quite complicated, complicated from a development perspective, from balancing, from a game feel perspective, and to create. And also it wasn't really clear that game was going to be a success. I would say like in 2018, maybe you start to see that, okay, maybe this is a game that could start to generate revenue. But yeah, you have Merge Magic that came out, and Evermerge, which is a recent one, which is not from Gram Games or Zynga. And then you see now Merge Gardens and a number of other ones come out, and then now with Merge Mansion. So there's definitely, there aren't that many players here, and I think that's something that we can talk a little bit more. And I think this subgenre kind of opens the door for it's casual for a reason. Like it's named casual, and I can talk about that. But I think it's important just to realize that we're still kind of comparatively speaking, as revenue wise, Merge is quite a small genre compared to Match 3, and that's something that I'd love to see Merge. I personally, really love Merge games, and I think there's a really big audience here. I think it's just about how you approach it, let's see in the future. So a little bit more about the casual Merge, and I think first of all, I'd like to just talk a bit more about from my perspective, about what is the kind of Merge 3 mean. So you have an isometric view. I think if you play that game, you come into it, it's one of those games that it's quite overwhelming in the beginning. The viewport is a lot smaller than the game area. So you have to like move and scroll in order to find things. And you're merging 3 items instead of just 2. And then there's a little bit of a gamification there, and that you can merge 5 and actually get much more, get a benefit from that. And one thing here is that I want to emphasize that items are really as decorations in that. So you're creating a space, and you're continually merging these chains together, merging them, and they get, the top goal is to get some really beautiful space, and then you kind of customize and move the stuff around in the space in order to maximize your area. And you can really customize. I've seen so many different spaces there in the game of different players that are they're so cool, because there's so much customization, personalization that you can do with that space. And then the items, they're essentially the visual progression. So you both have the items that are like static items that that generate things. But then you also have the dragons, which are character collections. So you have a slew of dragons that kind of help you do actions in the core game. And that's really where the long-term engagement comes from. Whereas like if you look at it just in comparison to casual merge, it's grid-based. So one of the first things you'll see is that it's very friendly, I would say, or more approachable to the match audience. So I can imagine, if you run ads targeted at match players, this will be a lot more appealing than, let's say, the merge dragons, just from like a barrier to entry. There's a lot of players that are quite risk averse and they want to stay in their lane in a way, and so it takes a lot for them to change genres. So I think this, at least, you have a grid base, and then you have the viewport, no scrolling. It's just everything that you can see is just right on the screen. And also you're merging 2 items instead of 3. So it's just a simple, like if you remember the memory games that we all used to play, we do pattern matching all the time. When you're typing in your keyboard, you're saying, okay, I want H. So that's H that I see in the screen. All of that is very simple, basic human stuff. And I think one thing that I really want to emphasize is the items as consumables. So the items are basically used in the metagame. You don't have stars. You're not, doing these items. I think in the match decorate, you have basically you complete a level and then you get a star, which goes to the metagame. In this one, you're actually doing the core game actions, and at the end, you actually use that item in the metagame. And that's what makes it quite distinct. And then I think right now, the long-term engagement is still quite varying. I think you have visual progression, which in Merge Mansion, some games are, relying more on narrative. We have more narrative elements, and you're helping the characters in the game. Potentially, obviously for us, social is going to be a big thing. And so there's, just to compare these two, because I think there's a tendency to kind of lump these together. And I think they actually should be very separate. There is the audience, I think, which is very similar, but I think we'll see, sure, you have the existing merge audience, but then you also see, audience coming from the match genre as well. And for the reasons that that it looks more approachable, it's something that, if you shoot a UA video, it's something that is a lot more, I guess, appetizing and easier to handle than Merge Dragon. And at the very bottom, I think this is really relaxing puzzle gameplay. You're doing this inventory management, moving things around. There's a lot of discovering new items. There's tinkering, so you kind of learn to discover things by just doing them. The game doesn't have too much. It doesn't have too much tutorial around that. And then this idea of strong core game volition. So you can do basically and create the space however you want it. And that feeling of volition and control is really something that's quite satisfying and a major motivation fulfillment for the audience. So this is like a super basic core loop, just to give you an idea. So you have these creators and they create items. And then you use them to kind of, they create items and use those for, in our case, we're using them to help others. So let's say Julia here, she has a need. And so, she needs a saw to cut down her tree. And so that's the kind of loop. So why is it one of the hot genres at the moment? So I think first and foremost, it's much more approachable. This is what I talked about before than Merge 3, but then also it's something that is leaning more towards the match audience. You don't have, it's grid based. It's, there's no scrolling. There's only match 2. And then it's perceptively easier to build than Merge 3. And I think that's something that, I think it is a perception. I think there's still, remains to be seen as far as content balancing, game feel, whether that's the case. Like, as we start building our game, we're finding our ways to do live ops and things like that. And it was definitely for us, it was a lot easier than, let's say, making a whole Merge 3 game. But yeah, Fertile Design Ground, this is one of a kind of a more of a, like, from, because I'm more of a design thinker. So I try to think of, when I looked at that game, I could immediately think of and many people that I've talked to, when they talk about this kind of this genre, it's really something that is that kind of stands out as, okay, hey, what if we did this, and that's a really promising for the innovation in the industry in this particular genre, is that there is, like, it's almost it's a playground for us to create this really cool, unique, interesting combination of that core game, the progression and the player fantasy. Then subgenre, it's still being defined. So I wouldn't say that you could compare it directly to Merge Dragons, and therefore there's still the hygienic features are still being defined. So the live ops, how do you run limited time events? What are the social elements in the game? And I think that's something, that's why it's why it's so appealing right now, is because it's still kind of a wild west in a way, where there's it's still a frontier. And then it potentially replaces Match 3 as a core mechanic for Match plus Decorate. I think this is a tricky one, because I think there's going to be there's already a few games that do this, but I think they miss a really clear opportunity to find new player, the connection, as I mentioned, to the core game and the progression and this player fantasy. This is where we wanted to kind of highlight and differentiate. So I talked a little bit about why we did the casual merge, but the city builder part, this is where I didn't talk enough about. So essentially what we did in very early stages, we knew we wanted to do this casual merge game, but we, at the very beginning, we did, okay, like what are all the possible combinations of different fantasy theme and setting, and so we created a whole bunch of different concepts here. And the criteria we ended up using is something like this, where we wanted to make sure that the context for which the actions that you're doing in the core loop, so that create, merge, and then complete, that there was a strong, really almost a narrative or context for what you're doing in the core loop. So for us, it was, I build a store, and then I create the store, and then once I have the store completed, then I send out the items to the players, and that's something that then you're growing the town, and it was really clear, intuitive connection there. And then non-alienating and approachable, something that was, something that we've seen in other game genres. We didn't want to go too like super fantasy or anything like. We had some ideas of doing like a Harry Potter style one, but it just it was there was some alien like idea that it might alienate some of the audience. So we thought about just trying to be as wide as possible. And cost and time and availability of assets. Like when we're trying to build this game, it was really just, okay, what are assets available for us? Being super pragmatic, because we need to build this game fast. Is like, are there town assets? Can we get those really quickly? Like, how much time does it take? And those are actually super easy to come by. But if we want to do like character, let's say an actual animal or something like that with animation and everything, that tends to be a bit more tricky, and wanted to get the game to that context to really sit in. And so it was really important for us to make sure that we could find, assets that were easy to execute, but really made sure that the immersion was there. And then we, obviously merge friends. For us, a big element here is the social features. So like, how can we, is it make sense that there would be social features. In this setting, it's really easy. You can have neighborhoods and neighbors that you can connect with. Scalability of visual progression. This is like, if I think into the future, how do the assets that we have, how did they scale? Does the visual progression scale? And we could easily find items that it's the hammers, it's the tools, it's the food, it's all of these that kind of fit. And it was really clear what the visual progression would be. And then lastly, this one's a little bit, I think, tied to some of all of these, but I think the low design risk. So having the ability to really come up with ideas as really that they were easy to come up with, and make it easier for you to kind of build out the game and the different systems. Yeah, and so we end up going through those, and we chose the city builder genre mainly because the connections between, okay, hey, we have this core game, what do you use the items for? And then it was like, okay, there's a city builder game. Here is the fantasy. We want to build the town. Okay, how do you do that? Then you serving the customers. And then we thought about, okay, here are the different, items that we could have in the game. And that was really the player fantasy. Wanted players to really feel like they were helping the town grow. And that's what we're doing now. And then we saw some early signs, the early progression in Merge Mansion. We saw that, there was so much stuff going on. So we tried to think, okay, like let's do a version of the board unlock that would be easier to comprehend. So we have these kind of areas on the board that unlock over time. And social, we have a friends list, and we're going to expand that quite soon, and having multiple boards. So these are some things that, this is the mixture of new, better, and improved. And I think this is where we want this is where we wanted to focus. But yeah, I think a couple of points, like just about defining the scope. I think for us, the positioning was really clear. We wanted to make sure that when this game came out, that it would be distinct enough. We didn't want to just copy what Merge Mansion had done, and I think they've done a really great job. But we wanted to position ourselves not as a clone, but as a standalone title. And so, as I mentioned in the previous slides, those are the ways that we were doing that. And I think that's really important when you're thinking about the game. If you're trying to deliver a game really fast, and you're trying to, let's say you're trying to enter into a genre, you need to define really what are the key things that you want to focus on, and then just do those as fast as possible. And then the vision, I think the vision for us really was, hey, let's make this a really tight game, the core loop. And then we have the meta game where the players are building the city. But how can you actually express that in the game? And we just use, as simple context as possible. We have like kind of a message list, which is kind of supposed to be like a messenger. And then you have the city view. And that was enough for us. But you just really define what is needed for you in order to get the player into the vision of the game. And I use different tools. So I've used Tower of Wands for this game. If you're not familiar with that, Ethan Levy, he has some insights into that. You can go look that up. Another is a player journey. And I often really quickly just do like a really quick, like, what do we need? This is the what do you need list. And then make a list of all the things that you can think of that if we want to do this, what does it take? And it's really scrappy. And it's just like, hey, what's the easiest way we can do this? And just some visuals for us about the iterative process. The art part was actually really something that it was very iterative. I mean, we had so many, like a very early stage. If you look at the one on the right, that was the first prototype we had in the game. People, the team, they all know about the cheese, the infamous cheese. And then, you can see that we wanted to make sure that, like, obviously the area unlock was one of the first things that we had to have in the game. and make sure that there's the progression. But we really focused on really what was the most important thing to have in the game, and then we just left everything the way it was. And yeah, same with the iteration on the delivery screen. So there are a lot of different. You should see my XD. It's a massive document with a whole bunch of different iterations of this, and you see generally there are some things that kind of stayed, like the city view is one thing that kind of stayed there, and having the characters there, having them kind of there that you can see, and you can see the item requested very clearly. And yeah, just some real quick tips. I think, especially for us, like building the game from scratch and with the time pressure that we had, the idea of theory crafting. So this is like a concept of thinking all the different, what are the different possibilities that you can do, and then choosing the best one actually is often the enemy when you're trying to do fastest iteration. So what we ended up doing was like we do, ideas, and then we say, okay, hey, this one is actually the one. We wouldn't do all of the possible opportunities and spend time that you end up losing a lot of momentum if you do that. And especially early on, it was really important for us to just execute. And that's where, sprinting to that MVP, what's the really smallest deliverable that you can do for the game in order to give the actual, the feeling that you want for the players. And I think this is important, the visual quality. I think there's often expectations that games need to have, amazing visuals, and they need to be super, beautiful. But I think if you're entering into a space, and I think this a lot to do with product fit and, how do you position yourself in the space when you're entering into a genre, like what do you need visually? What's the quality that you need? I think Merge Dragons is actually one of those where their visuals aren't, they're not super great. I mean, I don't mean to, say anything bad about Merge Dragons, but that game looks like as if it was executed with the idea that, hey, this is good enough. And it was. And that's something that I think I would encourage more developers to do, focus more on, especially in the early stage, just to try to get that game out as soon as possible. But yeah, now going into the future. So there are a few games. I won't touch too much on this, but there's a few highlights here that I've noticed on the market so far. One is Travel Town. This is a game that pioneered this kind of idea of this top taskbar. I think it's a lot. It probably, and I'll say this, that I don't know that for sure, but the Merge Town and Merge Farm, they have this kind of, Merge Farm has this top bar, and maybe it was inspired from there, where the characters come up and you deliver the goods there. But yeah, they have also similar kind of town visual progression, and they kind of rebuild the town as a little bit of their player fantasy as well. And then we have this is Merge Estate. So no visual progression really. So that's kind of distinct, but it's really story driven. There's, cutscenes and things like that to kind of drive the feeling of progression and narrative. They have a tight board space, at least I experienced, and they have these there's a few interesting features there. So if you're interested to learn more, that's a game to look out for as well. And then this one is Merge Matters, similar visual progression and story as in Homescapes. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think it's got potential. I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I'm not gonna. I can make predictions here, but it feels very similar to just playing Homescapes, but you just have the core game. So, I mean, maybe that's for some of those players that are really interested. But it'd be interesting to see how that develops. And then yeah, here are my thoughts on sort of the live ops operations of these kind of games. Merge Dragons is still the massive player in the Merge genre. So if you think of, we have the subgenres of casual Merge, and you have Merge 3. but of the overall merge genre, it's just a massive, from revenue perspective. And if you look at that game, the obvious, like if you just take a look at that success, they do event boards, and I think that's the obvious way to do it. But what do you give to the player from those event loops that drive into the main loop? And I think that's the only thing that is left to be solved here, is that Merge Mansion has started to do some of this. So they have items that you get from the event loop that help you complete tasks. But I think there's much more things, and this is obviously something that we're doing and thinking very much about, and already have ideas and are in development. So this is what is exciting for us. But yeah, I think what's next, I think just overall, like, how big is the market? How many players can fit within this space? I think this is, for me, this is the adoption curve, which is like it's the merge genre or casual merge adoption curve. And right now we're seeing like some early players come in. They come in, they see some ads, and they're like, oh, hey, this is really cool. And they come in not from any knowledge of that's a, that Merge Mansion would be a big game or anything, or any of the others, but more from just strictly from the gameplay mechanics. And then, how big does that, early majority, when you go into the bigger audience, like how big is that? And how many directions of this core game can it take? Like, there could be potentially, male focused games that come from this. And then I think what I would like to just highlight, I think what we're interested in is really trying to find, games and game genres that we're, looking at in this early stages. So we want to find these games that, when we build games in the future, is just looking for these games where they're just starting, and when they're finding opportunities there. So I think that's for us with Merge Friends, this is a clear direction. But yeah, there's lots of things in the future to see. No one has really cracked that live events to tap that long-term engagement. And Merge Mansion has that content head start, and it potentially could be a large barrier to entry if you compete against it. But I think sooner or later we'll see how things shake out. And yeah, that was it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Colin. That was great. That was a lot of information dropping there, for sure.
It was a lot, yeah. I had to cut a lot of things out, actually.
Yeah, man, talked about it before. Yeah, we can do a follow-up when you crack the live event thing.
Yeah.
Hey, I had a few questions. I'm like, if the audience has questions, please start writing them into the Q&A in Zoom. But like, I prepared a few ones here that I wanted to ask. Like, first off, can you talk about like the narrative in these games, how that kind of ties back to the merge? Because like haven't like all of these audiences have already fixed up these mansions in so many games? Like,
yeah,
do you feel that the novelty of the merge mechanic adds enough value for players to enjoy fixing up another mansion? What do you think?
I mean, I think it, time will tell. I think there's merge matters. I think that what I mentioned was one game that I think it looks like it's doing pretty okay. It's following a clearly defined like formula for making the game. I think what the opportunity, I'll just speak to maybe the opportunity. I think here what you have is you have an opportunity to really create games that are deeply immersive, because the core game has these items that if it's done right, you can tie things into the meta game that are really not done in match 3. You have like, you just, what are the things, the items that you can only really do the visuals. That's the only thing that you can change those, and there's no real context for the match items on the board. It's more just a theme thing, but these are actually used in the you use these items directly as context in the space. I mean, what we've seen so far is that, there's a huge demand for the game that we're trying to make and what we're trying to do with Merge Friends. I think that there's a lot of work to be done that, if we can grow the audience and reach into the match space, I think that's where the opportunity is. And I think we can do that through interesting player fantasies. But I think from a personal perspective, I think there becomes a danger that we end up just, doing these cookie cutter solutions for making games. And well, this has been around forever and discussed at length. But I think this gives us an opportunity now, really clearly, that there's fertile ground to make a whole bunch of different fun and cool games with this mechanic.
Makes sense. One of your slides had like these examples from like the thematic and like putting together the merge mechanic, for instance, with something like Heyday. Like, how did you know that would be a good match when you were figuring that out?
I mean, some of it is I don't want to say I think I'll say designer intuition in a way that like looking at what are games and what are the systems that are there in those games. And I think one of the clear, it was just so simple to think about that. Like it was the obvious choice. Like what I mean is that, if you look at City Builders, what they're doing is that you have this, timer based mechanic where you're creating these items. And then, you are actually, in a way, this merge mechanic is a crafting mechanic. You're crafting items from two smaller items. In this case, they're actually identical, but in merge in the City Builders, it's different items from, and then you bring them together and they create something new. And it's very similar, kind of, I guess, in a theoretical sense. And from a game design perspective, it's also very similar. And so it was kind of it was a natural, and that's why I think you see already, the other, two games that I had up there, Travel Town and Merge Estate, they're done something similar. And so when we thought about, it was like, here is the player fantasy, this is what we want. And then, okay, how do we express that? Okay, you're going to be helping others in the town. And we wanted to make it more personal. And I think then those things just kind of connected together as a kind of puzzle pieces when you're trying to create a game.
Makes sense. One question from me before we go to the audience questions. I wanted to, maybe this is a bit of a hard question, but like your gut feeling about like Match 3 and Merge as, sizes of market opportunity and category. Like what will it take to actually like Merge category to go to that sort of like the size of Match 3, and how likely do you feel that this category actually is as big?
Well, I think I can speak a little bit about if you're making a casual Merge game. I think you should try to, there's a couple of approaches about what kind of games you should make from this, but I think you should try to make it as, I think there are a few games already out there that are making the core gameplay quite complicated. And there's obviously a risk that if you have too many item chains, for example, and too many, too long chains, that the players get really confused. And I think you see that in the early stages of Merge Mansion as well. And that's, I think, casual, making it more approachable would be one venture to look into. But I think there's a risk that you have to really clearly define, like, how do you make it more approachable, but not remove what makes that game really fun, which is the whole idea of, that you have that space management. It's both a blessing and the curse in the genre, which is that you're optimizing the space, you're moving things around. That's kind of the fun part of it. You're trying to be smart about it, but then that's also maybe a turnoff for a lot of players. And so I think that's the balance of finding and it's also the monetization. It's main monetization. That's, if you have limited space, then you're more likely to purchase some of the, if you get a bubble to get an extra item, or, if you want to get more energy to spawn more items. I think this is, that's a really, I would say, definitely a really hard question. But I think, like, you might see, I think Love and Pies, I think that's one example of this. It's sort of like it's like a merge game in a way. You tap and then it creates another item and then you deliver that. It's very similar. But I think it's a tough question. And I would say that, approachability, looking at making the game maybe a bit more user friendly in some aspects, but without, sacrificing what the kind of core part of the game is.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, thanks for answering my questions. I'm going to let the audience ask some. So here's the first question that came in today. How are you sure when it's time to kill a game or push it forward a bit more or even pivot? Maybe you can answer that from the merge kind of perspective.
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear cut. I'll be really frank with this. I think it was really it was more of a pragmatic decision that when you're building a small company and things aren't going the way that you want, you really have to take drastic action. You have to do things really quickly, and I think that's maybe something that's a learning. And I think that if you're spending 2 months to validate some assumption, I think that's too much. I think you should really try to figure out what the game that you're trying to make, what is it trying to prove? And if you can't get it within, a month, I think that's when you gotta exit. Yeah. It's a pretty harsh thing, but I think that, I think there's different philosophies with this, and for every different type of game there's probably a different philosophy about like how and when you should kill the game. But I think my feeling is always like killing it way earlier than what you even think, maybe even make you uncomfortable, but then take those learnings into the next game and make something better.
Yeah, that sounds really good. There's a question here from Alessandro. Could you elaborate a bit on the WDWN thing?
Yeah.
Is it about scoping or defining a minimum viable product? Like how do you define it?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think what it forces you to do is, like, let's say you want some mechanic or some kind of feature in the game. You think as quickly as possible, just what do you need? Like, without thinking, and this is like the whole theory crafting kind of okay, here, let's do this, but let's just try to make a list of the things that you think you need. There might be some things that you don't know, that you're unsure about. But I think it's, for me, it was really, you make that list, and that really clearly, you'll find elements that are uncertain, and then you'll narrow those down really clearly. But then you can also just say, hey, I don't know, what are the options in that, setting, and then go, oh, we're going to do this one. It's not exactly the approach that I'm used to. And I think this is something that, like, working in a startup, the area, like, shifting from kind of more corporate game development is like, if you have some problem, you should look at all the different possible solutions. But that takes time. And if you're trying to deliver something, a lot of it is just hunch, and, you just go, hey, I think this one it's the least bad. It's the one that has the most opportunity of the list, and spending, as little time to actually figure out. I know this sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I think if you're really trying to build a game fast, you should be delivering the game rather than thinking about what the game actually is. Like there's a balance between that. And I hope that at some point we'd be, just putting stuff into games, putting them out as fast as possible instead of filtering it internally. Let the audience decide, let them decide, if it's a good feature or not. I think that's the recommendation. And that's how I use this tool, what do you need? What do we need approach.
Great. Question here actually on the topic of the whole webinar is like the 8 weeks that you spent on putting out the first version of Merge Friends. Like how many were on the team in total when you built that game in 8 weeks? Like how many developers? And another question is, did you do the research for like the market and the positioning like in-house or externally?
Yeah. So if I'm not mistaken, I think so. In the very beginning, we had one programmer, and we had 2 other people working together. Me and Oli working on the game to kind of build out the core part of the game. I'm a little bit hazy maybe on the timelines exactly, but I think it was about 3 to 5 people that we had, and we had like a part-time artist as well to help us in the early stages, Christian, who had done a really amazing job. He was so great. And I think that was the kind of core team, core 5. But when you're working in a startup, that was, everyone was wearing a lot of different hats and just trying to get the game out. I think as far as we didn't do any like market research in a way that we kind of just went with our gut with this. And when you're in a small company, you just have to deliver. And yeah, that's what we did. I mean, I think in the future, obviously we're working on this right now, which is building out more data on our audiences, building on market research, and then doing more, putting more investment into understanding, what themes are appealing to the audience, and that's where we're headed.
Good. There's a question here on the audience. So how do you talk
Sandro
to
again? Oh no, you skipped it.
Yeah, I'm skipping. Yeah. I'm giving everybody one question, and I'm going to go back to the people later. If we have time. Regarding the audience, how do you talk to your audience to determine what they want or need that you don't already have? It's like, put in another way, what is the best way to really do audience-driven development versus just picking an idea and prototyping it out?
Yeah, I think I think in this particular case, what we did was, we use tools that, like, for example, we use 12 traits. So what that does is it, creates a psychological profile, and you can use those as pointers in the right direction. We actually found that, for example, our audience was incredibly altruistic, which makes sense that, they want to help others, the kind of core idea of that. And so everything that we do now in the game is centered around helping people. And that's like, it seems simple. It seems like a really, maybe an obvious thing. But, I think, things like surveys are really critical. Reaching out to the audience, like a specific person, and actually doing, follow-up questions and asking them more about what they like about the game. Not just, you get anecdotal stuff, but you actually get a lot of insights into that. And then, playtests are really great resource as well for doing those. And then you can see really clearly, maybe there's early stuff that players are not understanding. So you want to tweak those. We have a really quite engaged Facebook community as well. So we're really active on that. And we look at that all the time, and we're like, oh, hey, obviously they're a vocal minority. So you have to keep that in mind and just think about that, maybe their needs don't represent the entire audience, but we use that for sure to understand, our audience better.
Right. Another question that I picked up here, Jaakko is asking about the metrics that you were looking at to sort of like determine the potential after the first launch, and then did you have an iteration round before you would say that this is it? Like, can you reveal that sort of phase?
I mean, yeah, it's funny. I mean, we added features along the way, and I looked at, obviously like big things are going to be the late game. So I wanted to make sure that there are features and things like that that would continue to, we have train deliveries, which are they're never ending, these tasks that the players can do. And every day players have these daily tasks that they complete. So it gives them, every single day on the week, they get the same task. So on Monday, you get Julia's orders. And so players expect this kind of cadence. And these are things that they come back to. But really we were super fortunate. I think that, we were able to kind of hit the right metrics really quite early on. Obviously, the monetization is something that we're continuing to iterate on and improve that. But like I said, I think that a lot of that is going to be driven by the live ops that we're developing right now.
So in a sense, like you were at the very early stage already putting in features that you knew that they're going to be needed for people to stay on for day 14, day 30.
Absolutely.
So you weren't focusing only on day 1.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, I think like we had a very bare bones. So day 1 was really good, and then we saw day 3, day 7 was also quite good. The core game itself was so important that we got right, and I think that you can add all these extra features and everything, but we did a lot of optimization, a lot of iteration on just the core game, gameplay, and how players progress. So,
got it. I actually got a question from the audience over email as well. I'll just read it out here. Megan was asking, how did you guys approach mapping out the content for the game? So I'm interested in knowing how you plan the overall kind of like the quest chains, those game items, and to sort of create this smooth experience. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, the balance here is that when you introduce new items to the game, it's just another thing that the player has to remember. It's with the same with city builders. At the end game, it's really hard to remember all of the different chains that you do, and what I wouldn't do is very early on, I wouldn't introduce a whole bunch of different item chains. So you have very specific item chains that kind of the player knows when they look at that item, they know that that's part of this chain, and they know that they can focus on that. But just as a kind of general guideline, keeping things as simple as possible, and item chains introduction is one of those, because it just it has a network effect in a way of all the things that you add another node on here. It's I have these chains, and then I have to think about all of them together. And it can be very overwhelming.
Got it. There's so many questions here. I'm going to pick a few ones that there's we haven't really touched base on enough. So I think the live ops is still a question mark, how you can actually take this game to retain players for months. So what do you feel is actually the biggest challenge in live ops for Merge?
Sorry, you cut out a little bit there, Dan.
So repeating the question, what do you think is the biggest challenge for live ops at this moment for Merge?
Yeah, I think I tried to highlight that. For me, at least, I think it's easy to, like I said, I think it's easy to do the event board. So when I say event boards, it's basically you have your static normal board where you get the normal progression, but you get a second board essentially that comes up, and then you can do. This is almost like an encapsulated space where you can you merge and do all these things, but it doesn't affect your core. So in Merge Dragons, essentially what you're doing in that game is that you do this core, you do this event board in order to get very specific exclusive rewards. And since it's time limited, that's what's going to drive, you know, the monetization, the performance. Now, what I was trying to argue there was that just simply that what is that, you know, what is that connection to the core game? How does the player feel that when they participate in a limited time event? How does that help them in their main experience, and how does that you know, translate into something that is really tangible long term? With this long term progression, you get some, you know, like items or something like that stay on the board, or it helps you complete quests. I think that's, for me at least, that's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about, hey, how do you run, you know, live ops and live events in the game?
Yeah, got it. I'm gonna do a final question here, which sort of we didn't touch base on yet. Do you feel that the merge mechanics, like blending those with another genre, something like idle, like the idle games, like what Colibri is doing, or
yeah.
do you think there are other kind of fusions with categories that you think that make more sense for merge to be a part of?
I think I can say that, like, I would just, you know, canvas the space, because I think one thing that you're really looking for is visual progression.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the different ways you can do visual progression? And then, you know, I mean, I think that this is very simplified, simplistic approach to this. But I think that could give you some insights into, you know, what are some possible, you know, ways of doing this. But I mean, I think, you know, the idle mechanic comes with its own territory of you know, with the numbers and having a lot of, you know, the progression and things like that. But I think that's at least, you know, what are the different, like literally visual, like what are the ways that you can kind of show visual progression and maybe go from there.
Oh man, this is really good. I'm gonna put this up on the Elite Game Developers YouTube channel later today, and sharing it all over the place. But Colin, this was really fun. I think people can reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to reach out to me, and we can have a merge party.
Good stuff, man. Hey,
thanks,
take care.
Thanks, Joakim.
See you again. Bye, man.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, everybody.